The scissors were already moving toward Adrian Corleone's jugular when Sarah Connor's hand shot out and caught the blade. Blood welled between her fingers as she gripped the steel, her breath catching in shock. The estate manager, Vincent, stood frozen behind Adrian's leather chair, his face draining of color as the moment shattered. The scissors clattered to the marble floor. Adrian didn't move, his dark glasses reflecting the afternoon light streaming through the French windows, his expression unreadable behind the permanent mask he'd worn for 3 months. 3 months since the accident had stolen his sight. 3 months since the vultures had descended. And Vincent had just revealed himself as the hungriest of them all. Mr. Corleone, I was just, Vincent stammered, backing toward the study door. Sarah pressed her bleeding hand against her uniform, her heart hammering. She'd only come to deliver his afternoon tea. She'd only glanced up at the wrong, or right, moment to see Vincent standing behind her employer with surgical scissors aimed at his neck, close enough to puncture the carotid in one swift motion. Sarah? Adrian's voice was quiet, controlled. Too controlled. What just happened? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. She watched Vincent's hand slide toward his pocket, toward the syringe she could see outlined against the fabric. The one probably filled with enough sedative to stop a heart already weakened by trauma. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder, interrupted. Nothing, sir, she heard herself say, her voice steadier than her hands. I just dropped the tea tray. Clumsy of me. Vincent's eyes met hers across the study. A warning, a threat, a promise of consequences. His family controlled half the staff. His brother ran security. His cousin managed the finances. The Corleone estate had become Vincent's kingdom in the 3 months since Adrian lost his sight, and everyone knew it. Everyone except Adrian. Or so they all believed. You're bleeding, Adrian said, tilting his head slightly. I can smell it. Sarah's stomach twisted. How much could he actually perceive? How much was he pretending not to see? The questions had haunted her since she'd started working here 6 weeks ago, since she'd noticed the small inconsistencies, the way his hand always found the doorframe, the way his coffee cup never quite needed the guidance the other staff provided. Just a small cut, sir. From the broken china. Vincent was moving now, circling toward the door with the careful steps of a man calculating his next move. She could see it in his face. He was deciding whether to finish what he'd started or retreat and try again later. The syringe in his pocket seemed to pulse with malicious intent. Vincent, Adrian said softly, not turning his head. You're still here. It wasn't a question. The estate manager froze. Yes, Mr. Corleone. I was just checking on your comfort. How thoughtful. Adrian's fingers drummed once against the armrest of his chair, a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was thinking, processing, planning. You can go now. Sarah will see to my needs. The dismissal was gentle, but something in Adrian's tone made Vincent's face harden. He looked at Sarah one more time, a look that promised this wasn't over, before leaving the study with measured steps. The door clicked shut. Silence flooded the room like water filling a grave. Sarah stood there, her hand throbbing, blood seeping through her uniform, wondering if she'd just saved a man's life or signed her own death warrant. Vincent wasn't the type to forgive interference. And she was nobody, a maid who'd taken this job out of desperation, who had a mother dying of cancer and medical bills that consumed every penny she earned. She couldn't afford to lose this position, but she also couldn't watch a man die. Come here, Adrian said. Her feet moved before her mind could protest. She crossed the Persian rug, stopped in front of his chair, close enough to see her reflection in his dark glasses. Close enough to notice what she'd been too afraid to acknowledge before, that his head had tracked her movement with impossible precision for a blind man. He reached out, and his hand found hers with no hesitation, no fumbling. His fingers wrapped around her bleeding palm, his touch warm and surprisingly gentle. You cut yourself on scissors, he said quietly. Not broken china. Scissors don't break tea trays. Her breath caught, and Vincent wasn't checking on my comfort. He was standing directly behind me, less than a foot away, at an angle that served no purpose unless he intended to strike. Oh God. Mr. Corleone, You stopped him. Adrian's thumb brushed across her knuckles, avoiding the cut. You grabbed the blade with your bare hand. That's not nothing, Sarah. That's not clumsy. That's sacrifice. Her throat tightened. She wanted to pull away, to run, to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. But his hand held hers firmly, and something in his stillness told her that running would be the worst possible choice. "How long have you known?" she whispered. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "That Vincent wants me dead? Or that you're the only honest person in this entire estate?" "Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I love connecting with you all. And listen, if you're enjoying this story so far, if your heart is already racing wondering what happens next, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this is going. Things are about to get even more intense." The question shattered something inside her, some barrier between employer and employee, between the seen and the unseen. Because if he knew Vincent was dangerous, if he'd been aware this whole time, "How much can you actually see?" she asked. Adrian's expression shifted, something dark and calculating crossing his features. "Enough," he said. "I can see enough." And in that moment, Sarah Connor realized she'd just stepped into a game far more dangerous than she'd imagined. A game where the blind millionaire wasn't the victim at all. He was the hunter, and everyone else in the estate was prey. Adrian released her hand and stood, moving past her with fluid confidence that made her stomach drop. He walked to his desk, no hesitation, no groping for furniture, and pulled open a drawer. From inside, he retrieved a first aid kit. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair he'd just vacated. Sarah's legs obeyed while her mind spun. She watched him return, kneel before her, and begin cleaning her wound with practiced efficiency. His hands moved with certainty, applying antiseptic, wrapping gauze. Not like a blind man, like a medic. "You're wondering why," he said, not looking up from his work. "Why I'm pretending. Why I'm letting them think I'm helpless." "Yes," she whispered. "Because people reveal their true nature when they think no one's watching." He tied off the bandage, his fingers lingering a moment on her wrist. "My father built this empire from nothing. When he died and left it to me, I thought I knew who my allies were. Then the accident happened, and suddenly everyone had a plan for my money, my companies, my life." His jaw tightened, and for the first time, Sarah saw past the careful mask to the rage burning underneath. "Vincent has been embezzling for months. My CFO is selling company secrets. My head of security is running an illegal gambling ring from my property. And my own cousin," he stopped, his breath harsh. "My own cousin tried to have me declared incompetent so she could seize control of my assets." Sarah's chest ached. She'd come to this estate desperate, broken by her mother's illness and drowning in debt. She'd expected to find a tragic figure, a man destroyed by loss. Instead, she'd found someone fighting a silent war in the dark. "Why tell me?" she asked. "You don't know me." Adrian's head tilted, and even behind the dark glasses, she felt the weight of his attention. "Don't I? You're 28 years old. You work double shifts, here and at St. Mary's Hospital as a night clerk. Your mother has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You're drowning in medical debt, and you took this job because it pays better than anything else you qualified for." Her blood ran cold. "How?" "I investigate everyone who works in my home," he said simply. "But investigation only tells me facts. It doesn't tell me character. That, I had to see for myself." He stood, moving to the window, his back to her. The afternoon light painted him in gold and shadow, and Sarah noticed for the first time how his shoulders carried a burden no one else could see. "Last week," he continued, his voice softer now, "my accountant accidentally paid you $3,000 extra. A clerical error, he called it. Do you remember what you did?" She did. She remembered staring at her bank balance, seeing enough money to cover her mother's next round of treatment. Remembered the temptation burning through her like fever. Remembered walking into the estate office and handing the check back. "I returned it," she said. "Everyone else has been stealing from me for months. The chef inflates grocery costs and pockets the difference. The gardener bills for equipment he never buys. The housekeeper has been selling my mother's jewelry piece by piece." His hands curled into fists against the window frame. "But you had every reason to keep that money. You needed it desperately, and you gave it back." Sarah stood, her legs shaky, her hand throbbing. "It wasn't mine." "No," he agreed, turning to face her. "It wasn't. And that's why you're the only person in this house I can trust." The weight of those words settled over her like a mantle. Trust. When had anyone trusted her with something that mattered? When had she been anything more than invisible? A servant, a caretaker, someone who cleaned up other people's messes and disappeared into the background. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Adrian smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. "I want you to keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Be honest. Be observant. And when the time comes, I want you to help me bring them all down." "I'm just a maid," she protested. "No." He closed the distance between them, and this time when he reached out, his hand found her cheek with impossible gentleness. "You're the woman who grabbed a blade to save a stranger's life. You're the woman who chose honor over survival. You're not just anything, Sarah Connor." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and heat flooded through her. Dangerous, unwanted, impossible heat. This was her employer. This was a man playing a deadly game with people who wanted him dead. This was a complication she absolutely could not afford. But God help her, when he touched her like that, she forgot every reason this was a terrible idea. "Vincent will try again," she said, forcing herself to focus. "He knows I saw. Let him try." Adrian's voice went cold. "I've been waiting for him to show his hand. Today he finally did. And when I'm ready, when I have everything I need, I'm going to destroy him and everyone else who thought they could steal from me." Sarah should have been frightened by the ice in his tone. Instead, she felt something else entirely. A fierce satisfaction that this man, this broken, brilliant man, was going to get his justice. "How can I help?" she asked. Adrian's smile turned predatory. "Tomorrow, Vincent is meeting with my lawyer to try to have me declared mentally unfit. I need you in that room, taking notes. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Good." He released her, stepping back, the professional distance returning. "And Sarah? Be careful. Vincent's family controls most of the staff. Trust no one but me." As she left his study, her hand wrapped in his bandage, her heart pounding against her ribs, Sarah realized her life had just changed irrevocably. She'd come to this estate to survive. Now she was staying to fight. If you're loving this story, drop a comment and let me know what you think is going to happen next. Is Adrian playing a dangerous game? Can Sarah really trust him? Your theories fuel these stories, so don't hold back. The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and lies. Sarah stood in the corner, notepad in hand, trying to make herself invisible as Vincent's lawyer. A sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Trask laid out her case for Adrian's incompetence. Around the mahogany table sat Vincent, the CFO David Mills, head of security Richard Kimball, and Adrian's cousin, an elegant woman named Clarice Starling, who kept dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Adrian sat at the head of the table, dark glasses in place, his posture relaxed. Too relaxed, like a panther pretending to sleep. "Mr. Corleone," Catherine said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "we're all concerned about your well-being. Since the accident, you've been isolated, dependent, unable to manage your affairs properly. Your family just wants what's best for you." "How touching," Adrian murmured. Vincent leaned forward, his face a mask of concern that made Sarah's skin crawl. She'd watched him last night, seen him slip into Adrian's study at midnight. She'd followed, hidden, and witnessed him photographing documents from Adrian's safe, documents he shouldn't have known how to access. "Adrian, we love you," Vincent said, and Sarah wanted to scream at the audacity. "But you're not well. Let us help you. Sign the power of attorney over to Clarice, just temporarily, until you've recovered." "Recovered from what exactly?" Adrian interrupted, his voice mild. "Blindness isn't a mental illness, Vincent. But the trauma," Clarice whispered, fresh tears streaming. "The depression, the isolation. You barely leave this room anymore. You've stopped seeing friends, stopped attending board meetings. Because you've all made my life a living hell," Adrian said softly. The room went still. Sarah's heart hammered as she watched Adrian stand, his movements controlled and deliberate. He walked around the table. No hesitation, no cane, just pure confidence, and stopped directly behind Vincent's chair. "Did you think I didn't notice?" Adrian asked, his hand settling on Vincent's shoulder with enough pressure to make the estate manager flinch. "The missing funds? The forged signatures? The little empire you've been building with my money?" Vincent's face went white. "I don't know what." $700,000, Adrian continued, his voice conversational. "That's how much you've stolen in 3 months. Impressive, really. If you'd been patient, You might have gotten away with it. Catherine Trask stood abruptly. Mr. Corleone, these are serious allegations, which is why I've already contacted the district attorney. Adrian smiled, and it was terrifying. In fact, she should be arriving any moment with a warrant for Vincent's arrest. The words detonated like a bomb. Vincent lunged from his chair, but Adrian's hand was already moving, striking with precision that spoke of hours of training. Vincent crashed to the floor, gasping. Richard Kimball jumped up, reaching for something under his jacket, but the conference room doors burst open and federal agents flooded in. Nobody moved. Chaos erupted. Catherine Trask was screaming about lawsuits. Clarice had abandoned her tears for rage, shrieking about betrayal. David Mills bolted for the window, only to be tackled by two agents. Richard went for his weapon, but Adrian's voice cut through the pandemonium like a blade. Richard, I wouldn't. Unless you want your illegal gambling operation exposed along with everything else. The security head froze, his hand on his holster. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, her notepad forgotten, watching as the carefully constructed facade of Adrian's helplessness shattered completely. He moved through the chaos with absolute authority, directing agents, pointing out hidden documents, calling out specific crimes with dates and amounts that proved he'd been watching, recording, gathering evidence all along. You can see, Vincent gasped from the floor, blood trickling from his split lip. You've been able to see this whole time. Not everything, Adrian admitted, turning to face him. The accident left me with limited peripheral vision, some blind spots. Enough that I'm legally blind, but enough that I could see exactly who you all really were. Clarice spat at him. You manipulative bastard. We're family. Family doesn't try to have me declared incompetent to steal my inheritance. Adrian shot back, his composure finally cracking. Family doesn't hire lawyers to lock me away. Family doesn't. His eyes found Sarah across the room, and whatever he was going to say died on his lips. Because Vincent's brother had just appeared in the doorway, and he had a gun pointed directly at Sarah's head. Everyone stopped moving. The brother, Thomas, snarled. Or the maid dies. Time crystallized into single, sharp-edged moments. Sarah saw Adrian's face transform from controlled anger to absolute terror. Saw him take a step toward her, hands raised. Saw the federal agents drawing their weapons, creating a standoff that could only end in blood. Thomas, don't, Adrian said, his voice stripped of everything but raw fear. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. Thomas screamed. Vincent told me how she stopped him yesterday, how she's been helping you spy on us. She's the reason our whole operation is falling apart. Sarah couldn't breathe. The gun barrel pressed against her temple was cold, and Thomas's hand shook with rage and desperation. This was how she was going to die, caught in someone else's war, paying for someone else's crimes. Let her go, Adrian said, moving closer despite the agents trying to hold him back. Take me instead. I'm the one you want. Adrian, no, Sarah started, but Thomas jerked the gun, silencing her. You cost my family everything. Thomas hissed at Adrian. Your father destroyed us, took our business, left us with nothing. We finally had a chance to take back what should have been ours, and this bitch ruined it. My father won that business fairly, Adrian said, still moving forward with his hands raised. And Vincent destroyed himself through greed and stupidity. But Sarah is innocent. She's just trying to survive, just trying to take care of her dying mother. Please, Thomas, let her go. Something in his voice, the naked desperation, the plea, made Sarah's eyes burn. This man who'd orchestrated an elaborate revenge, who'd played everyone like chess pieces, was begging for her life. Why do you even care about some maid? Thomas demanded. Adrian's jaw clenched. Because she's the only real thing in this entire house of lies. Because she chose honor when everyone else chose greed. Because... He stopped, his next words caught in his throat, but Sarah heard them anyway in the space between heartbeats. Because she matters. Part 4. Rising tension. The standoff lasted 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then Sarah drove her elbow backward into Thomas's ribs with every ounce of desperate strength she possessed. The gun discharged, a deafening crack that made her ears ring, and the bullet buried itself in the ceiling. Before Thomas could recover, federal agents swarmed him, driving him to the ground with enough force to crack the marble floor. Sarah's legs gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest with arms that trembled. "You're okay, you're okay," he kept repeating, his hands running over her hair, her face, checking for injuries. "God, Sarah, you're okay." She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The reality of how close she'd come to dying crashed over her in waves that left her gasping. Adrian held her tighter, his heart hammering against her cheek, and for a moment the chaos around them. Agents hauling conspirators away in handcuffs, Catherine Trask demanding lawyers, Clarice screaming threats. All of it faded into white noise. "I thought," Adrian's voice cracked. "When I saw that gun to your head, I thought." "I'm okay," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure that was true. "I'm okay." The district attorney, a formidable woman named Erin Brockovich, approached them with careful steps. "Mr. Corleone, I'm going to need statements from both of you. But perhaps we should move to a more private location?" Adrian nodded, still not releasing Sarah. "My study." 2 hours later, after the statements were given and the estate had been cleared of everyone except essential staff and federal agents processing the scene, Sarah found herself back in Adrian's study. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but her mind kept replaying the moment. The gun, the fear in Adrian's eyes, the desperate choice he'd been willing to make. Adrian stood by the window again, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "You should go home," he said quietly. "Take a few days. After what happened, I'm not leaving." He turned, and even behind the dark glasses, she could feel his surprise. "Sarah, you hired me to help you," she said, standing on legs that still felt unsteady. "And we're not finished. Vincent, Thomas, Clarice, they're arrested, but you said there were others. The CFO, the chef, the housekeeper. They're still here, still stealing from you. They're not holding guns to your head. No, but they're still guilty." She crossed to him, driven by something she couldn't name, gratitude, stubbornness, or maybe something far more dangerous. "And I keep my promises." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You could have died today. So could you. Yesterday, the day before that. You've been risking your life for months, playing this game." She reached up, her fingers hovering near his face. "Let me help you finish it." His hand caught hers, holding it against his cheek. The intimacy of the gesture stole her breath. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk yourself for me?" "Because you see me," she thought. "Because you trusted me when no one else would. Because when you touch me, I feel less invisible than I have in years." "Because it's right," she said instead, the safer answer. Something flickered across his face, disappointment, maybe, or understanding. He released her hand and stepped back, the professional distance returning like a wall between them. "Fine," he said, "but we do this carefully. David Mills has been selling company secrets to our competitors. I need proof of the buyer. Can you get into his office tonight?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "What am I looking for?" "Emails, documents, anything linking him to Cyberdyne systems. They've been underbidding us on every major contract for the last 2 months. Someone's feeding them our proposals." "I can do that," she said, then hesitated. "Adrian, what you said during the standoff. About your vision. How much can you actually see?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I have about 30% vision in my left eye. Shadows, shapes, movement. Enough to navigate if I'm careful. Enough to see people's body language, their tells. But I can't read documents, can't drive, can't see faces clearly." His mouth twisted. "The doctors say it might improve, or it might get worse. There's no way to know." The uncertainty in his voice broke something in her chest. This man who'd seemed so invincible, so in control, he was terrified of losing what little sight he had left. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't." The word came out harsh. "Don't pity me. That's what everyone else does, and I can't stand it from you. It's not pity." She moved closer, drawn by instinct. "It's empathy. There's a difference." His hand found her face again, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're remarkable, Sarah Connor. Do you know that?" Her breath caught. If you say you're just a maid one more time, I'm going to fire you," he said, a hint of humor breaking through. "You're a woman who grabbed a blade to save a life, who walked into a hostage situation with courage most trained agents don't have, who's risking everything to help a man she barely knows. That's not just anything." The space between them felt charged, dangerous. Sarah knew she should step back, should remember that he was her employer, that this was complicated and messy and could only end badly. But when he looked at her like that, like she was something precious, something worth protecting, all her reasonable thoughts scattered. Tonight, she managed. I'll get into Mills's office tonight. I'm coming with you. Adrian. Negotiable, he said firmly. You're not going alone. Not after today. Something warm unfurled in her chest. When was the last time anyone had wanted to protect her? When was the last time she'd mattered enough for someone to risk themselves? Okay, she agreed. Together. His smile transformed his face, and for the first time since she'd met him, Sarah saw past the rage and the pain to the man underneath. Brilliant, fierce, and utterly alone in his war. But not anymore. Midnight painted the estate in shadows and silver moonlight. Sarah's hands trembled as she worked the lock-pick into David Mills's office door. Adrian stood beside her, his body tense, listening for any sound of approaching footsteps. She'd learned lock-picking from her older brother before he died, a skill she'd never imagined using. But tonight it felt like a gift from beyond the grave. The lock clicked. They slipped inside. Mills's office smelled like cigar smoke and corruption. Sarah moved to his desk while Adrian kept watch by the door, and she began rifling through drawers with practiced efficiency. Bank statements, expense reports, travel itineraries to places Mills had never mentioned. Her fingers found a leather portfolio hidden in the bottom drawer. Adrian, she whispered. I found something. He crossed to her, his hand finding her shoulder as she opened the portfolio under the desk lamp's dim light. Inside were printed emails, contracts, and, her blood went cold, photographs. Photographs of her mother's hospital room, of Sarah leaving her apartment, of Sarah entering the Corleone estate on her first day of work. What is it? Adrian asked, sensing her distress. They were watching me. Her voice came out strangled. Before I even applied for this job, they were watching me. Adrian took the portfolio, his face darkening as she described the images. His fingers traced the documents with the careful attention of someone reading Braille, piecing together information from texture and shape. This is a complete dossier on you, he said slowly. Medical history, financial records, your mother's diagnosis. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Sarah, this is dated 4 months ago, a month before you applied here. The implication hit her like a physical blow. They wanted me to work here? Not wanted. Engineered. Adrian's voice went deadly quiet. He pulled out his phone, using the accessibility features to scan one of the documents. The AI voice read it aloud. Subject displays optimal characteristics for infiltration. Financial desperation, medical crisis, no criminal record. Recommend approach for employment placement. Sarah's legs wouldn't hold her. She sank into Mills's chair, her mind reeling. I don't understand. Why would they want me here? Adrian was already moving through the portfolio, his expression growing darker with each discovery. Because you're perfect, he said bitterly. Honest, desperate, invisible. They thought they could control you. Use you to access areas of the estate they couldn't reach. And if anything went wrong, you'd be the perfect scapegoat. But I didn't, I never. I know. He knelt before her, his hands finding hers. I know you didn't. But Sarah, there's more. Look at this. He held up a document, a life insurance policy, on Adrian Corleone, for $50 million, with Sarah Connor listed as the beneficiary. Her heart stopped. That's not possible. I never signed. They forged your signature. Probably the day you were hired. Adrian's voice was ice and fury. Don't you see? They were setting you up. If they managed to kill me, if their plan worked, you would have been the primary suspect. A desperate woman with crushing debt who suddenly stands to inherit millions. The perfect patsy. The room spun. Everything she'd thought about her job, about her hiring, about the strange stroke of luck that had brought her to this estate. All of it was a lie. She'd been a pawn from the beginning, manipulated by people who'd researched her vulnerability and exploited it. They knew about my mother, she whispered. They knew I'd do anything to save her. And they were counting on it. Adrian's thumb brushed across her knuckles. But they made one critical mistake. What? They thought desperation would make you compromise your integrity. They thought your need would make you blind to wrong. They didn't account for the fact that you're fundamentally good, Sarah. That even when they gave you every reason and opportunity to be complicit, you chose honesty instead. Tears burned her eyes. I'm so sorry. If I'd known. Stop. His voice was firm. You have nothing to apologize for. You're a victim in this, just like me. But now we know the full scope of their plan, and we can use it against them. A sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps. Coming closer. Adrian pulled Sarah to her feet, grabbed the portfolio, and moved with swift precision to the window. "Can you climb?" he whispered. She nodded, her heart in her throat. They'd broken into an office 2 stories above the garden, and the old trellis outside looked questionable at best, but staying meant getting caught with evidence that could bury them both. Adrian went first, testing each handhold despite his limited vision, moving with the confidence of someone who'd spent months learning every inch of this estate by touch and memory. Sarah followed, her hands slick with sweat, the portfolio tucked into her jacket. They were halfway down when the trellis cracked. Sarah's foot slipped, her body swinging out over empty space. She bit back a scream as Adrian's hand shot out, catching her wrist with bruising strength. For a terrible moment, they hung suspended, him clinging to the trellis with one hand, her dangling from his grip, the ground 15 feet below. "I've got you," he gasped. "I've got you. Adrian, you can't hold us both. I'm not letting you fall. Never." The intensity in his voice, the absolute certainty, sent something electric through her chest. She found a foothold, pulled herself up, and they scrambled the rest of the way down just as the office light flicked on above them. They ran. Through the garden, past the fountain, into the shadows of the old greenhouse where Adrian finally stopped, both of them gasping for breath. He still held her wrist, his grip gentler now, but no less secure. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No. Are you?" Instead of answering, he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her face. "When you started falling," he said roughly, "I saw my whole world dropping away." Sarah's heart thundered. "Adrian, I know this is wrong. I know you work for me, that this is complicated, that I should keep my distance. But Sarah, I can't anymore. Not after tonight. Not after seeing how deep their plan goes and realizing that from the moment you walked into my life, someone was trying to use you to destroy me. And instead, you became the only thing worth protecting." His hand cupped her face, and this time when he kissed her, there was nothing professional or distant about it. It was desperate and fierce and full of all the fear and relief and impossible feelings they'd been dancing around for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah knew everything had changed. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They were allies, partners, and maybe something far more dangerous than either. The call came at 3 a.m. Sarah jerked awake in the guest room Adrian had insisted she use. "Too dangerous to go home," he'd said, not with Mills knowing they'd been in his office. Her phone screen glowed in the darkness. St. Mary's Hospital. Her blood turned to ice. "This is Sarah Connor," she answered, her voice breaking. "Miss Connor, this is Dr. Chun. I'm sorry to call so late, but your mother's condition has deteriorated rapidly. You need to come now." The world tilted. Sarah was moving before she'd fully processed the words, throwing on clothes, running through the dark hallways. She burst into Adrian's room without knocking, found him already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed as if he'd sensed her panic. "My mother," the words choked her. "I have to go. Now. I'm coming with you." He was already reaching for his shirt. "Adrian, you can't. Mills will know we broke into his office. If you leave the estate." "I don't care." His voice was steel. "You're not facing this alone." 20 minutes later, they were in his car. Adrian had a driver, one of the few staff members he still trusted. The city lights blurred past as Sarah sat rigid, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Adrian's hand covered hers, warm and steady, the only thing keeping her from flying apart. When they reached the hospital, the fluorescent lights felt like accusation. Dr. Chin met them in the hallway, her expression grave. "Miss Connor, your mother suffered a massive stroke. We've stabilized her for now, but..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Her living will specifies no extraordinary measures. I need to know if you want us to." "No." The word ripped from Sarah's throat. "You do everything. Everything. I don't care what it costs." Dr. Chin's face softened with pity. "Miss Connor, even with aggressive treatment, the prognosis is poor. And the cost? We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for care that will likely only extend her suffering." "I said do it." Sarah's voice cracked. "She's my mother. She's all I have. I'll find the money, I'll..." "Sarah." Adrian's hand gripped her shoulder. "Can we have a moment?" Dr. Chin nodded and left them in the harsh hallway light. Sarah turned to Adrian, tears streaming down her face, and saw her desperation reflected in his expression. "I can pay for it," he said quietly. "All of it. Whatever she needs." "No." Sarah shook her head violently. "No, I can't let you. That's not why This isn't about money. I know it isn't. But Sarah, you don't have to choose between your integrity and your mother's life. Let me help." The temptation was overwhelming. To say yes, to accept, to save her mother with Adrian's wealth. But even through her panic and grief, Sarah saw the trap. The same trap Mills and his conspirators had set, using her desperation to compromise her, to make her dependent, to blur the lines between what was right and what was necessary. "If I take your money," she whispered, "everything changes. The case against Mills, the evidence we found, my testimony becomes worthless because I'll have accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars from you. Any lawyer will paint me as bought and paid for. They'll say I fabricated everything to protect my benefactor." Adrian's face went white. "I don't care about the case. But I do." Her voice broke. "These people set me up, Adrian. They researched my life, found my weakness, and tried to use me as a weapon against you. If I let them win now, if I let desperation make me compromise everything, then they were right about me all along. Sarah, that's not. My mother wouldn't want me to save her by destroying myself." The tears came harder now, each word agony. "She raised me to be honest, to stand up for what's right even when it costs everything. And it's costing everything. But I have to believe that matters. I have to." The lights seemed too bright, the antiseptic smell too strong. Sarah felt herself fragmenting, breaking under the weight of an impossible choice. Behind them, through the window of her mother's room, she could see the machines keeping her alive, and knew that without Adrian's money, those machines would be shut off within days. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest while he held her like she was something precious and breakable. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry." A commotion down the hall made them both look up. David Mills was striding toward them, flanked by 2 police officers and a woman in an expensive suit. "There she is," Mills said triumphantly, pointing at Sarah. "Officers, I want to press charges for breaking and entering, theft, and corporate espionage." Sarah's world stopped spinning. It plummeted. "Mr. Mills," one of the officers said, "do you have evidence?" Mills smiled, cold and victorious. "Security footage from my office showing Ms. Connor rifling through my desk at midnight, and Mr. Corleone conspiring with her. I have the timestamps, the recordings, everything." Adrian stepped in front of Sarah. "That's absurd." Sarah was caught on camera stealing confidential documents. Mills interrupted. He turned to his lawyer. "I'm also filing a restraining order against both of them. And I'll be testifying to the board that Mr. Corleone's judgment is severely compromised. A blind man having an affair with a servant he's now using for corporate espionage? The board will have him removed within the week." The walls were closing in. Sarah could barely breathe. Her mother dying behind her, arrest in front of her, and Adrian's entire world crumbling because he'd trusted her, helped her, loved her. "Adrian," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." "No," he said fiercely, but his voice shook. Mills's smile widened. "Officers, if you'll do your duty." One of the officers stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. "Miss Connor, you'll need to come with us." Sarah looked at Adrian, really looked at him, and saw him breaking. Not from the blindness or the betrayal of his staff, but from watching her be destroyed while he stood powerless to stop it. This was the darkest hour, and she couldn't see any way out. "Wait." The voice came from behind them, clear, strong, and utterly unexpected. Sarah turned to see a woman in her 60s, elegant despite the late hour, striding down the hospital corridor with the bearing of someone used to command. Behind her walked Aaron Brockovich, the district attorney, and 2 more federal agents. "Mrs. Corleone," Adrian breathed, shock evident in his voice. His mother, Elena Corleone, moved past the officers with barely a glance and stood before Mills, her expression glacial. "Mr. Mills, you've made a grave tactical error. You see, I've been conducting my own investigation since my son's accident, and I've been waiting for you to make your move." Mills's confidence flickered. "Mrs. Corleone, I don't know what you've been told, but I've been told nothing. I've witnessed everything. Elena pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward the officers. This is live security footage from Mr. Mills's office. But not from his cameras, from the ones I had installed 3 months ago. Would you like to see what your footage conveniently doesn't show? The officer leaned in to look, and his expression changed immediately. Elena continued, her voice sharp as broken glass. My footage shows Mr. Mills entering his own office at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before Ms. Connor and my son arrived. It shows him moving files, staging his desk, and activating a secondary camera system designed to capture only specific angles. It also shows him placing that forged insurance policy in a location where it would easily be found. She turned her cold gaze on Mills. You weren't documenting a crime, Mr. Mills. You were manufacturing evidence. Mills's face went from pale to gray. You can't. I can, and I have. Elena looked at the district attorney. Ms. Brockovich, I believe you'll want this footage, along with the complete financial records I've compiled over the past 3 months documenting Mr. Mills's embezzlement, his conspiracy with Vincent Harper, and his connections to Cyberdyne Systems. Aaron Brockovich's smile was predatory. Mr. Mills, I think we need to have a different conversation. Officers, please escort Mr. Mills to the precinct for questioning. Ms. Connor, you're free to go. The world tilted again, but this time in the opposite direction. Sarah watched, stunned, as Mills was led away, his lawyer already on her phone, his empire crumbling in real time. Mom, Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. How did you really think I'd leave my son alone in that house with vultures? Elena turned to him, her expression softening. I've been living in the guest house for months, watching everything. I know you thought I was in Europe, but I couldn't leave you. Not when you were in danger. Sarah saw something break and heal simultaneously in Adrian's face. You've been here the whole time. Every day. Elena touched her son's cheek with gentle fingers. I watched you pretend to be helpless. I watched you gather evidence, play your games. And I watched you fall in love with this remarkable young woman. She turned to Sarah, and the assessment in those sharp eyes was terrifying. Sarah Connor. The girl who grabbed a blade. The girl who returned money she desperately needed. The girl who just now refused hundreds of thousands of dollars to save her dying mother because accepting it would compromise her integrity. Elena's voice gentled. My dear, you're exactly the kind of person this family needs. Mrs. Corleone, Sarah managed, my mother, is being moved to a private suite as we speak, with the best oncology team in the country taking over her care. All expenses covered by the Corleone Foundation's medical charity program. Not a gift, Miss Connor. She qualifies based on need and circumstance. Your integrity remains intact. The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Sarah's knees buckled. Adrian caught her, and this time when she cried, they were tears of relief so profound she couldn't breathe. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for me? Elena smiled, a real smile that transformed her stern features. Because my son loves you. And because watching you choose honor over survival reminded me why my late husband and I built this empire in the first place. To help people who deserve it. To be the kind of wealthy that makes the world better, not worse. She turned back to Adrian. The board meeting is in 2 days. Mills's arrest will be public by morning. With the evidence I've compiled and Ms. Brockovich's prosecution, everyone involved in the conspiracy will be facing charges. Your position is secure. Your sight is your own business, and your choices in companions, she glanced meaningfully at Sarah, are entirely your own. Adrian pulled his mother into a fierce embrace. Sarah watched them, her heart so full it hurt, understanding that she'd just witnessed something profound, a family reuniting, a son realizing he'd never been as alone as he'd thought. When they separated, Elena squeezed Sarah's hand. Go see your mother, dear. Tell her she's going to be fine. And when you're ready, we'll talk about your future. Because I have a feeling the Corleone family is going to need someone with your particular talents in a more permanent capacity. Sarah looked at Adrian, questions in her eyes. He smiled, that devastating smile that had first made her heart skip, and nodded. Go. I'll be right here. She ran. Her mother's new room was 3 times the size of the old one, filled with monitoring equipment and bustling with specialists. But all Sarah saw was her mother's eyes opening, focusing on her, filling with tears. Baby, her mother whispered. What happened? Sarah took her hand, careful of the 4 lines. I met someone, Mom. Someone who sees me. And his mother just gave us a miracle. You fell in love. It wasn't a question. Sarah laughed through her tears. Is it that obvious? You're glowing, sweetheart. Even through all this fear and exhaustion, you're glowing. Her mother's grip tightened weakly. Tell me about him. So Sarah did. She told her about Adrian's courage, his clever trap, his impossible plan. About how he'd been broken and put himself back together in secret. About how he'd trusted her when no one else would. And about how, somewhere between grabbing that blade and refusing his money, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a man who saw her more clearly while blind than anyone ever had with perfect vision. The boardroom of Corleone Enterprises hummed with tension 2 days later. Sarah stood against the back wall in a professional suit Elena had insisted on buying her, her hands folded calmly despite the chaos brewing in the room. The board members, 12 powerful executives who controlled billions in assets, sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. At the head of the table sat Adrian, his dark glasses removed for the first time in public since the accident. His left eye, though damaged, was visible, a declaration that he had nothing left to hide. David Mills sat 3 chairs down, flanked by his own lawyers, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Despite his arrest, he'd made bail and was fighting the charges with everything he had. Today's emergency board meeting was his last chance to salvage his position and destroy Adrian's credibility. Gentlemen, lady, Mills began, nodding to the sole female board member. We're here because Adrian Corleone has allowed his personal life to compromise his judgment and our company's security. His relationship with a domestic employee has led to illegal break-ins, stolen documents, and false accusations against long-standing executives. That's a lie, Adrian said calmly. Is it? Mills smiled. Then explain why you and Ms. Connor were caught on camera in my private office at midnight, rifling through confidential files. Because you were stealing from the company, Adrian replied. And we were gathering proof. Mills's lawyer stood. Mr. Corleone admits to the break-in. I move that the board vote immediately on his removal as CEO, citing gross negligence and, given his visual impairment, incapacity to lead. The room erupted. Board members arguing, lawyers shouting objections, Mills looking triumphant. Sarah's heart pounded. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Elena Corleone stood from the visitors' gallery. If I may address the board? The chairman, an older man named Harrison Ford, banged his gavel. Mrs. Corleone has the floor. Elena walked to the front, commanding attention with every step. Gentlemen, I've spent the last 3 months conducting a comprehensive audit of every department in this company. What I found was systematic corruption that would have destroyed everything my husband built. She placed a thick folder on the table. Mr. Mills has embezzled $1.2 million. But that's just the beginning. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with financial records, emails, and bank transfers, all meticulously documented. Mr. Mills sold proprietary technology to Cyberdyne Systems for personal profit. He conspired with Vincent Harper to have my son declared incompetent. And when my son began investigating, Mills attempted to frame Ms. Connor, a woman he specifically researched and manipulated into employment, for crimes he himself committed. Mills shot to his feet. This is absurd. You can't prove. I can prove everything. Elena's voice cut like steel. Because unlike you, Mr. Mills, I understand that real power isn't stolen in the dark. It's built on integrity, evidence, and justice. She nodded to Aaron Brockovich, who entered from a side door with 2 federal agents. David Mills, Brockovich said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and corporate espionage. Your bail is hereby revoked. The room exploded again. Mills lunged across the table toward Adrian, rage overtaking reason, but the agents subdued him quickly. As they dragged him out, he screamed threats and accusations that echoed down the hallway. When silence finally fell, Harrison Ford looked at Adrian with new respect. You knew all along. Not all along, Adrian admitted. But I knew something was wrong. So I did what my father taught me. I watched, I listened, and I waited for them to reveal themselves. By pretending to be more disabled than you are, another board member said. That's manipulative. It's strategic. Elena's voice was firm. My son has 30% vision in one eye. He is legally blind. But he's also brilliant, capable, and exactly the leader this company needs. The question is whether this board will judge him on his abilities or his disabilities. Sarah's throat tightened as she watched Adrian stand, facing the board with quiet dignity. "I won't lie to you," Adrian said. "Running this company with limited vision is harder than it would be otherwise. I rely on technology, on trusted advisors, on adaptation and determination. But I've proven over these 3 months that I can do it. I've identified and exposed a conspiracy that would have bankrupted us. I've protected our assets and our reputation. And I've done it while most of my own staff believed I was helpless." He paused, his gaze moving across the faces before him. "My father used to say that leadership isn't about never falling. It's about how you get back up. I fell, literally and figuratively. But I got back up. And I'm asking you to let me keep leading this company forward, not despite my limitations, but with the wisdom they've given me." The silence stretched. Then Harrison Ford stood. "All in favor of retaining Adrian Corleone as CEO?" 11 hands rose. Only Mills's empty chair remained opposed. Sarah's eyes burned with tears as the board members stood one by one, shaking Adrian's hand, offering support and apologies. She watched him accept it all with grace, watched him navigate the social complexities with the same skill he'd used to navigate his physical ones. But the biggest shock came from Harrison Ford, who approached Sarah directly. "Ms. Connor," he said, extending his hand. "The board has reviewed your role in exposing this conspiracy. We'd like to offer you a position as special advisor to the CEO. You've demonstrated integrity, courage, and loyalty that's rare at any level. We need people like you in leadership." Sarah's mouth fell open. I'm just. If you say you're just a maid, I'm going to have security escort you out," Adrian called from across the room, his smile audible in his voice. Laughter rippled through the boardroom. Sarah looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly, then at Adrian, who was watching her with such pride and love that her heart could barely contain it. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. The room applauded, and Sarah realized that somewhere between grabbing that blade and this moment, her entire life had transformed. She was no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. She was seen. She was valued. She was home. 3 months later, Sarah stood in her mother's new apartment, a bright, spacious place with wide windows overlooking the city and enough room for the medical equipment that still monitored her progress. The cancer was in remission, the doctors cautiously optimistic, and color had returned to her mother's cheeks. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother said, adjusting the collar of Sarah's dress. "He's a lucky man." Sarah laughed, nervous energy making her hands shake. "Mom, it's just dinner." It's not. It's not just dinner, and we both know it." Her mother's eyes twinkled. "That boy has been in love with you since you grabbed that blade. Tonight, he's going to make it official." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. In the 3 months since the board meeting, everything had changed. She'd thrown herself into her new role, learning corporate strategy and executive management with the same determination she'd once applied to scrubbing floors. Adrian had been patient, supportive, helping her navigate a world she'd never imagined belonging to. Their relationship had remained professional at work, carefully maintained boundaries that everyone respected. But outside the office, they'd built something real. Quiet dinners where they talked for hours. Walks through the estate gardens where Adrian taught her to see the world through senses beyond sight. Moments of laughter and vulnerability and growing trust that felt more solid than anything Sarah had ever known. "What if I'm not ready?" Sarah whispered. Her mother took her hands, her grip stronger now than it had been in months. "Baby, you grabbed a blade to save a stranger's life. You chose integrity over survival. You stood in front of a board of billionaires and earned their respect. You're ready for anything." A knock at the door made Sarah's heart leap. She opened it to find Adrian standing there in a perfectly tailored suit, holding a bouquet of white roses. "You look stunning," he said softly. "You can't even see me properly," she teased, the old joke comfortable between them. "I can see enough." His smile was warm. "I can see the way you're standing in the doorway like you're about to run. I can see the nervous energy in your hands. And I can see that you're wearing the blue dress I love because I can smell the perfume you only wear with it." Her mother laughed from inside the apartment. "Take her before she talks herself out of whatever you're planning, young man." Adrian offered his arm, and Sarah took it, letting him lead her to the car. But instead of heading to a restaurant, they drove to the Corleone estate. Sarah's pulse quickened as they pulled up to the mansion, no longer a place of danger and deception, but something that had started to feel like home. The gardens had been transformed. Thousands of tiny lights hung from the trees, creating a canopy of stars. A table for two sat beside the fountain, set with elegant china and flickering candles. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers. "Adrian," Sarah breathed. "This is too much." He looked uncertain for the first time. "I wanted it to be special, but if you'd prefer something simpler." "It's perfect." She squeezed his hand. "You're perfect." They ate dinner under the stars, talking and laughing. The easy conversation of two people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. Elena appeared briefly to say hello, her approval warm and genuine, before disappearing back into the house with a knowing smile. When the meal ended, Adrian stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me." They strolled through the gardens, past the greenhouse where they'd hidden after their desperate escape, past the trellis where Sarah had nearly fallen and Adrian had refused to let her go. The memories layered over the present, showing how far they'd come. Finally, Adrian stopped at a small grove of cherry trees. New plantings, their branches still young but promising future beauty. "I planted these last month," he said quietly. "My vision might get worse. The doctors say there's a chance I could lose what sight I have left. And I needed to do something that would last, something that would grow into beauty I might never see fully." Sarah's throat tightened. "Adrian, let me finish." He turned to face her, his hands finding her face with the careful tenderness that always undid her. "These 3 months with you have taught me something my accident never could. Vision isn't just about what you can see with your eyes. It's about recognizing value, seeing truth, understanding what matters. And Sarah, I see you. I've always seen you. Your courage, your integrity, your incredible heart." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Sarah's world narrowed to that single point. "I'm not offering you a perfect life," Adrian continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm offering you a real one. One where I might struggle, where we'll face challenges, where people will judge us for how we started. But I'm also offering you every bit of my heart, my trust, and my future. Sarah Connor, will you marry me?" The ring was simple but beautiful, a diamond that caught the starlight and threw it back in brilliant refractions. Sarah looked at it, then at Adrian's face, at the vulnerability and hope written in every line. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, laughing through tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Sarah saw Elena watching from a window, her hand pressed to her heart. Saw the lights of the estate glowing warm and welcoming. Saw the future spreading out before them like a garden waiting to bloom. "I love you," Adrian said against her hair. "My brave, beautiful, impossible Sarah." "I love you too," she replied. "My brilliant, stubborn, remarkable Adrian." They stood there under the stars, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build a life in the light. Sarah thought about that first moment. The scissors, the blade, the blood on her hands. She'd thought she was saving a stranger's life. Instead, she'd saved her own. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional, twisty tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment telling me what you loved most. Was it the romance, the mystery, or that moment when Sarah grabbed the blade? Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you the next story. Until then, remember, sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of courage. See you in the next one.